Folks, this is the True American Podcast. I'm your host. I have a returning guest with us, Dr. John Lott. He's the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. He's also an author of several books, but we're gonna talk about the Crime Prevention Research Center and his books as we get a little bit into the interview. But what I wanted to talk to him, the reason why I brought him in today, folks, is that he's going to give us some numbers about a disturbing trend here that I think everybody should be aware of. And it's really, in my view, nonpartisan, because criminal violence impacts everybody and everybody. No one should take, quote unquote, a political position for or against violence. And so, Doctor, I read this article here, and I'm going to quote from it. Much more violence against pro-life people than against pro-choice since the Supreme Court leak on May 3rd. 135 attacks on pro-life people between the Supreme Court leak on May 3rd and September 24, 2022. Only 6 attacks were identified in the other direction. Could you give us a little bit more about that? Or what do you think's going on here?
Right. Well, after this summer, there are lots of news articles talking about all the violence against pro-choice type organizations and clinics. And when we were looking at some of the news stories on it that were citing pro-choice organizations that were putting out the numbers, this thing that caught my attention was that they didn't actually list any current cases. So we reached out to the pro-choice organizations, asking them for their list of cases. We reached out to multiple ones many times. We got acknowledgments that they had received our request, but they never provided us with a list. So then we reached out to the reporters who were covering this story and asking them if the pro-choice organizations had given them a list. And it turns out they had it, which is a little strange. Reporters like to have kind of current examples to go and give people to kind of motivate the story that they have there. And so it turns out that the U.S. Department of Justice does have a list of attacks involving pro-choice, attacks on pro-choice facilities or people. And but they literally only have one, after May this year, and not very many before that. It's interesting. Under the Biden administration, they've gone back multiple years to try to find cases that they could go and bring criminal complaints against. So they've worked hard to get that, and their list is up to date. So what we try to do then is essentially do a news search to see what cases we could find. And as you say, we were able to find 135 instances of violence, property damage against pro-life individuals or organizations because of their views that were covered in local media around the country. These are not things that get coverage in national news media. And we were able to find a total of 6 cases involving pro-choice. So that's a ratio of over 22 times more. And, just in talking to reporters and what have you, I got the impression that reporters were much more interested in covering pro-life, violence against pro-life than they were against covering violence against pro-choice. And if that's true, if there is that bias in terms of what they cover, then our 35 to 6 ratio may actually understate the imbalance. There may be some more than the 135 cases that we were able to find in the media. It's just that they didn't get coverage. Anyway, at least to me, it was very surprising. It wasn't what I expected, given kind of what I've read in the media, to find not only that there was more violence against pro-life individuals or organizations, but it was so dramatically greater at more than 22 times. We're eventually going to go back prior to May and try to put together a list over that period of time. But it's part of the thing also when the media over the summer was covering this issue, they were saying that because of the Dobbs decision, they were arguing that pro-life people were upset and doing the violence. And I have to confess, that never made a lot of sense to me because, here they were winning this case. Why should they be the ones who would be upset at that point? But I don't know. That was the media narrative for much of the summer. It fits in with other things, too. I mean, we've also done research on mass murders, mass public shootings type instances, and the media often describes these individuals as white supremacists, white racists. But if you look at it, they actually look to be left-wingers. I'll give you an example. You look at the Buffalo mass murder from earlier this year at the grocery store in Buffalo. The guy was clearly a racist. But if you read his manifesto, he was a racist because he was an environmentalist. He was upset because he claimed that blacks and Hispanics were having too many children and that having children damaged the environment. The guy described himself as a socialist and described himself as an eco-fascist. I don't know. That doesn't seem to match what most conservatives believe. I don't think there are too many conservatives that are upset about people having kids.
Right.
And, it's not just that case. I mean, you look at the El Paso mass murder, the Ohio mass murder, or even things, international ones like the New Zealand mosque killer. All these individuals were racist, but they were racist because they were environmentalists. They were all upset that they felt that minorities were having too many kids and that having kids damaged the environment. The New Zealand killer, in fact, said that his ideal form of government was communist China, which hardly makes him a right-winger. But yet the media narrative is if you're a racist, you must be conservative, even though, and they would claim that they've gone through their manifestos carefully or their diaries. And yet, they seem to refuse to acknowledge that you can have racists who are left-wingers that are there. And in fact, I would argue if you look at these cases, most of the ones involving some type of racism seem to be environmentalists.
Folks, this is the True American Podcast. I'm your host. We have with us Dr. John Lott, president of Crime Prevention Research Center. Before I give some follow-up questions to you, Doctor, could you give us the website of your organization and
Yeah, sure.
people can get in touch with you?
Right. It's crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org.
And at that site, can people read articles? Can they?
Yeah, sure. It's all there. Everything at crimeresearch.org have everything that we've been talking about is there. The stuff on abortion is right up at the top of the page that's there, so people can click on it. And the thing is, they don't need to take our word for these cases. Not only do we list out the cases, not only do we have links to the Department of Justice website, we also, and to news stories that were done, but we also have links to all the underlying news stories for each of the cases so that people can go and check them out themselves and see whether they agree or not. But I think it's pretty clear. This is an important issue, and we don't want people just to trust us on it.
Right. What I find fascinating is that you heard, okay, I'm hearing this narrative, but let me go check it out for myself.
Right.
And in the process of you checking it out, you're finding out something I find personally rather disturbing. It's a lot of the pro-life people who are experiencing this violence. I mean, disproportional. I mean, at a higher level than the pro-choice people are. Do you think there is a deliberate effort on the part of the media to hide that, or what are your thoughts?
I can't get into people's minds. I don't know why necessarily they do the things that they do. What I can say is that the pro-choice organizations put out press releases and with just broad claims that there's been an increase in violence. They don't actually list the cases, but it appears as if it just fits the media narrative, and so they just run with it. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned before, what's most surprising to me is that, and I'm sure you know this, the media likes to have kind of current examples to give people, kind of flesh out the stories.
Yes.
And, so you would think they'd say, well, just provide us with a list so that they could go and have some current examples in there. Mm-hmm. But they don't do that. I mean, they have examples that are many years old. As I say, that kind of gave me alarm bells about what was going on with that, because I just found it very surprising. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why we reached out to both the pro-choice people and to the media. Mm-hmm. So I just, I think my own guess and the most benign explanation is it just fits their narrative. So they don't really care about checking. They just take the quotes and they don't spend really much time on putting the articles together. But you have lots and lots of articles this summer. You have articles, obviously, in past years. And part of this, I think, right now is just kind of the narrative going into this election, where Democrats want to go and say that Republicans and conservatives represent a real threat. It's kind of like, the Paul Pelosi story from the previous weekend. Mm-hmm. The media immediately started calling the person kind of conservative. I don't know. I mean, I suppose we'll still find out more, but you have this homeless guy who's living in a bus who has flags for Black Lives Matter and for gay rights out in front of it there. The woman that he was with for 15 years describes him as an extreme progressive on virtually all the issues that are there. He hardly seems like a conservative to me. But yet, again, it just seems like it fits a certain narrative, and so the media puts that out. And I think they do people a real disservice because few people, are going to go and check the cases themselves. Few people are going to go and do things like read the manifestos for these mass murderers or other things. But yet, this has been a constant narrative by the media.
Folks, this is the True American Podcast. I'm your host. I have with us Dr. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can go to his website, crimeresearch.org. I got one more question, but I just want to make a comment to my listeners. Listen very carefully to what the doctor just said. Hey, don't take my word for it. Check out these other sources. Check out my sources. Is that correct, Doc? Is that basically what you're saying?
Right. I mean, we list all the cases there with links to the news stories. We give a link to the Department of Justice so you can see their list. I mean, given that the Biden administration's been willing to go back years to try to put their list together and that it's current and up to date, at least indicates that they made a serious effort to put these cases together. Even their list going back years has just a fraction of the number of cases that we have just this summer there. So, I think it really raises questions about the media narrative that people hear.
Wow. Yeah, it seriously does. And your book, I just want to quickly comment on your book, Gun Control Myths. Is that the correct title?
That's my most recent book. I have 10 books.
Okay. Gun Control Myths. And there, again, I'm just assuming here that there are some things, commonly believed things about gun control, and you sort of done some research to say, well, that's not quite the case. Here's what the facts.
That's correct. I mean, the book goes through 45 different false claims about guns that we see in the media. So, for example, one of the most common claims is that the United States is somehow unique in terms of mass public shootings. And that's simply false. if you look over the last 20 years, the United States ranks about 63rd in terms of the frequency of mass public shootings. It's just that these attacks in other countries don't get a lot of attention. You had in just France, in just 1 year, 2015, you had the concert shooting where 130 people were killed.
Oh my God.
You had other mass public shootings that were there. They had more people wounded or killed in that one mass public in that year than the entire 8 years of the Obama administration. If I were to go and ask people, just Western Europe compared to the United States over the last 10 years or so, where have the two worst mass public shootings occurred? Well, one was in France that I just mentioned. The other one was in Norway, where 67 people were killed. Both of those are much worse than any mass public shooting in the United States. But yet my guess is most people don't know about those. The thing is, this year there have been big school shootings in Russia. Most people don't know about those. Often these attacks in other countries don't get news attention, and that's understandable. An attack in the United States is a lot more newsworthy to Americans than, let's say, an attack in Russia at a school. You'd think at least the media would fact check the different claims that Biden or others put out about these types of things, but they don't do it. And it's just one example of the type of thing that I think makes a big difference in the gun debate that's there.
Definitely. Sir, I want to thank you for your time. I mean, in just a few minutes, you educated me, and you also have taught me, reinforced one lesson I always have, is that the education system needs to do a better job in teaching our young people how to think, not what to think. When I went through college, Berea College, my professors were constantly on me because I was a leftist at the time, so-called Marxist and all. So I'll be saying this and that, and they would challenge you each time. They said, "Mr. Sievers, go do your research. Go contact, show me some sources, some of your sources." And I wouldn't do it. It wasn't until years later when I changed my views, and I changed my views because I started checking things out for myself. And so, folks, please read books like buy and read books like Gun Control Myths by Dr. Lott. Please go to his website, crimeresearch.org, and see things for yourself. Get the facts. Let's get straight to the source of things. Let's just not accept nilly-willy what the media puts out there. Doctor, thank you so much. Hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Well, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.